Hi, this is Dayna with Novels Live TV, and I'm sitting here with David Morrell, and it's such a privilege, I gotta tell you. I mean, I'm like, hello.
Well, thank
and I
you.
have one word, Rambo.
Rambo. Don't do it, Rambo.
Don't do it?
We were in a restaurant last night, Gail Lynn's and I, and the waitress came over and said, "We know who you are." And I said, "Who do you think I am?" "We know who you are." And they know who you are too. "Well, who do you think I am?" "No, really, we know who you are."
So tell me.
And yeah, but she wouldn't tell me. I said, "I'm not an actor. Okay, I'm not in show business, although some might disagree."
Yeah, behind the scenes.
And then they came over and said, "Don't do it, Rambo." And they started quoting all these lines from First Blood. Because they had, in fact, someone on the wait staff who was back from Iraq and was a huge Rambo fan and had seen the documentary Drawing First Blood that's on many of the Rambo DVDs. And now he's over, and then the other waiter came, and then the manager came, and then the food came. Plate after plate of free food.
Oh, it's good to be
Oh,
here.
it was wonderful. And it was just so much fun I don't know how they would recognize. I don't get it at all, but anyhow.
Well, there's a first time for everything.
There is,
and isn't it about time?
I wish my wife had been there, because then she could see the
Oh, she's
awe
not
and
gonna be-
majesty with which I should be treated.
Well, you certainly should. And so, do you stay in touch with, like, Sly?
With my wife? Yeah.
Well, your wife,
see her
that's
often,
good. Yeah.
With Sly. Sylvester and I are not friends in the sense that I've never had dinner with him.
Mm-hmm.
I've had many, many conversations with him, and every 2 or 3 years he will phone and we will have a conversation of about an hour. Usually it's around, he says, "We're thinking of making another Rambo movie. I wanted to run see how you felt about what we were doing." And the most recent movie, which is called Rambo, there's a funny thing about this, because the first movie is called First Blood, but for some reason people call it Rambo. And this can only lead to confusion, because the last movie is called Rambo. You know, I mean, so anyway, the first movie is called First Blood, and what he said to me was that he felt that the first movie was the best of them, and that the character had a degree of depth to him and realism in him that was not present in the second and third movie, which he also described as, in an uncomfortable fashion, as glorifying violence. And what he wanted to do, he said, in the fourth one, was a film that, in effect, was his idea of a Sam Peckinpah film, in which the violence would be so graphic that we would recognize the self-hatred that the character has. This is the key to Rambo, that he hates himself. He discovered he did one thing well, and that is to kill him. And he hates him, so that at all costs he's trying to repress it. And the films, and in part the novel, show that repression until it comes out. And he said, "What I'm going to do is the character that you wrote, not even in the film, but the character from your novel," which I was shocked by, that they would be going back to that far into the mythology to get back to the root. And the character, the film, at the beginning and the end, I think, works very well. The middle, it is like a big gap. There's something missing. And I'll tell you what it is. But the character is the character that I imagined. It's very interesting how he's washing himself all the time. He's standing in rain. He's standing in water. He can't get clean. You know, there's that sense of, and at the beginning, where he's a snake hunter for the snake farm, and he hunts cobras, and the cobras don't care. They're not bothered by him, and he's not bothered by them. It takes one to know one, you know. And he's just casually picking up these poisonous snakes. And I thought, for trying to get a metaphor for what Sly thought of the interpretation of my book. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Now what's missing? All right, the film, Sly told me that when they were done filming and they were editing, that the distributor decided that the target audience was 17-year-old boys.
This happens all the time.
And that the movie had to be gutted in order to have it just have action. And I knew something was missing. And as it happens, in a week or two, sometime in July, a extended cut DVD of Rambo, the fourth film, is being released with 13 more minutes.
Oh, good.
And I gathered from what Sly was telling me, it's all dialogue. And it's the stuff that was meant to express the emotions and what have you. And one of the things I liked about the film, he's hardly ever called Rambo in the film. He's called the boatman, because that's what he does. He runs a boat and he gets things and delivers things, and he's called the boatman. And I naturally, as a former professor, think of Charon and the river Styx.
That's what I was thinking.
And going to hell and all of that. And in another interview, an interview I read that Sly gave, he was thinking the same thing. And he's a smart man.
I've heard that.
That he's not so much book educated, although he has that, but he thinks in metaphors and ways in which you can try to make something perhaps deeper. Well, the problem with that fourth movie is that it didn't have a chance. But so I'm kind of curious to see what this extended cut is going to look like. And it interested me that by contract, I have a credit card at the beginning of all Rambo films that says based upon and gives my name. And what wasn't contractual was at the end of the film, when the so-called credit crawl begins, when the names begin going this way, you see almost immediately, based upon the novel First Blood by David Morrell. Now, that was not contractual. Didn't need to be done. It's very odd for the writer to get the source material to get 2 credits. And I just assumed this dated back to the conversation that he and I had, in which he said they were trying to get back to the root character. And a 5th movie has been talked about for many, many times, and I've seen some of the material for it, and I was not happy with what I was seeing. It was.
Yeah, that was my next question. Is it hard for you when you have this character so played out in your mind and so developed on paper and whatever, and then to see it on the big screen not exactly the way you want it?
Well, the first one, the movie's the same plot, except Rambo dies in the novel and does not die in the movie. It's the same plot. It's drastically reimagined and reinterpreted. My character is self-loathing and angry. In the film, he is a victim.
Right. Yeah.
And he's picked upon, and oh, woe is me. And then, now I sort of mock that, but I don't mean to, because it works. It's a consistent, effective characterization. It's not the book. Right. The joke I have is the movie is war as heck, and the novel is war as hell. And
so it's a dumbed-down version, kind of.
I wouldn't say dumbed down.
Watered down.
Yeah, as any movie must be. And the biggest loss is the character of the police officer, who in the novel is fully fleshed out. A war hero from the Korean War, from a different war, traditional war, a kind of Eisenhower Republican, a man whose personal life is in tatters, and who is, as a consequence, trying to pay attention to business because his life over here is a mess. Yeah. And so he thinks at the very beginning, he said, I can let this kid go. What do I care about this kid? He says, yeah, but that's how the mistakes get made. That's how you let it slide when you got personal problems. You let stuff just go. So I'm not going to let this go. And if he'd only chose a different path, there wouldn't be any story. Yeah. And he's trying to be a professional because his life is a mess. And that's all developed. And he's in the novel. Rambo has killed the posse. In the movie, he maims them and what have you. He never kills anybody. But he does Vietnam on them. and then the police officer has dragged himself through brambles and everything to get away. He's like been flayed alive almost by himself to get away, and he's lying bleeding at the side of a road, and he's delirious, and he's thinking, I get it. The kid's a better fighter than I am. I get that. Different war, different training, I get that. But I'm a better organizer.
So he still had to have the one up on it.
And that's when he brings in Colonel Troutman, the guy who trained Rambo. Bring in the expert, you know, and this character is a fascinating, you know, man whose life is falling apart. He's put everything on the line for what he thinks is a just cause, and of course, it doesn't feel that way to us, but we understand what he's doing.
Well, you are just totally amazing, and I just want to ask you, I know we're kind of going over, but the process of writing your book and then having it optioned, then, you know, there's thousands of books that are optioned, but only a very small percentage actually get made into film.
Yes.
So did you feel really blessed, or were you skeptical that it would actually get green-lighted and, okay, it's going to go, it's actually going to work?
It was a complicated process. Initially, Stanley Kramer had the rights. And I've been finding a lot when I talk to people, you know, Stanley Kramer, or I'm going to mention Richard Brooks in a moment, you know, people I work, I like Brooks's work, not so much Kramer's, as a director at least. People don't know who they are anymore, you know, but at one time Stanley Kramer was a big deal.
Big, yeah.
I think he produced High Noon. No, I think he did. That's how the rumors start, right? Who knows? I should not say anything I'm not sure of, but he had given us his word that he would do an option with us. And so we waited 6 months, and then he said, I changed my mind. And we had nothing in writing, and off Stanley went. And then Larry Terman, Lawrence Terman, in his credits, co-producer of The Graduate, nice guy. By then the book was out, and he found the book in a Beverly Hills bookstore. And he pulled it out, he looked at it, and he said, you know, this could make a movie. And he said, more than that, I think Richard Brooks, writing and directing this, would do real good. And he took it to Columbia, and they all agreed. And we didn't get an option arrangement, which for people who may not be familiar, that's when they give you a down payment, as it were, on the project, and they get to work with it for a year or two to make the film. But if they don't, end of agreement, I have the rights back, and I keep the down payment. But they said, we'll buy the movie. We're just going to buy it. They were that confident. And I flew out to meet Brooks. It was kind of funny because I wore a suit and a tie, and I didn't know what I was doing. I was very young. I mean, he looked at me like I was nuts. He was wearing what amounted to a butcher's costume, this white, I can't even describe it. He looked like he'd come from a karate class or something.
I know what you're talking about.
And he clearly thought I was, you know, I didn't fit. And it was clear when I was done he never wanted to talk to me again. And he worked on it was an interesting conversation, though, to be with him and Larry Terman, and we're talking about, you know, the professionals, and talking about In Cold Blood and Elmer Gantry. And, oh, it was just wonderful to talk movies. I admired his work a lot. So he worked on it for a year, and he turned it in, and they said, you know what, we don't want to make this movie. And they sold it to Warner Brothers. And they went, it looked as if Martin Ritt was going to direct with Paul Newman. But Newman was going to play the police officer. All right, and then that fell apart. And then another personal favorite, Sidney Pollack, came aboard. Director, I dearly admire Sidney's work. And Steve McQueen was going to be Rambo.
Oh.
And Sidney personally told me they worked on the movie, not to shoot, but prep and all that, for 3 months before they just remembered that Steve was 45 years old. And in 1975, could not possibly play a returned Vietnam War veteran, because they were all 19, 20, 21 years old. Like, they just, what is it? So then it went on, and then it went on. 6 studios, 26 scripts. And then these two fellows who were film distributors who had a company called Carolco. One was Andrew Vanya, and the other was Mario Kassar. And they wanted to make a movie, and they knew Ted Kotcheff. Now, Ted had done a terrific football picture, a prison football picture, and I can't, no, now North Dallas 40, was that it?
Oh, yeah.
And he had worked on First Blood when it was at Warner Brothers. Mm-hmm. And they had asked, they wanted to be in business with Ted. They said, what movie would you like to make? And he said, First Blood. I've worked on that forever. I'm so sorry it got away from you. And they said, all right, we'll do it. And they got Sylvester to be in it. So, you know, things moved together in an interesting way. And just as a footnote, Ted isn't directing any more than I know of, but his name is on every week on Law and Order. He's one of the supervising producers of Law and Order.
Which is one of my favorite.
Yeah, well, I like the Special Victims Unit.
I love Special
Victims. I think that's the gold one of the men, and Sharon Stone was on for 4 weeks.
Yes, she was.
Brilliant what she did.
She did an amazing job.
Yeah, it's just really very cool. You know, it's nice to see her growing into, you know, being a mature actress. Yeah, growing and doing it with the hell of a role. Anyway, they filmed it in British Columbia, and then I guess the only other interesting story about it would be that they finished it. They kept a version of my ending in which Rambo dies. Point being that the system that created Rambo destroys him.
Right.
That is, the film is an allegory, and Colonel Trotman's first name is Sam. He is Uncle Sam. So it's kind of interesting when you see the allegory.
But they couldn't do sequels if they killed him.
Well, they weren't thinking that. They thought that was the movie, you know. And they showed it at a screening in Las Vegas, Nevada, and had a riot, where everybody who had been with the film and really enjoyed it. And it's an exciting film, and especially if you've seen it in a theater at the time, people were like going with the character. They were fidgeting and going, I'm going to get him, and all stuff like that. It was really interesting to see. And this, you know, somebody yelled out, "Is the director here? We want to find this director. Where is he?" And it was like, you know, they were going to hunt him down. And they realized that they made a mistake. And Sly had, from the start, said, you know, you can't kill this guy the way we are interpreting him, because in the novel he's non-refundable. Right. And that's the way Sly likes to talk. But in the way we've done it, he can be redeemed, and we must redeem him. So they went back to Canada, where the film was made outside Vancouver, in a town called Hope, which is a real name, and that's why it says Hope. It works perfectly as he's walking into town. Oh, you know. And near Golden Ears National Park, a gorgeous place in Vancouver, or in British Columbia. And they spent, you know, 2 weeks or whatever shooting the new ending. And then
that worked.
Yeah, and then yes, and for the film it would work. In the book it wouldn't work.
Right.
And then they said, "Wow, we can make sequels." So,
and they did.
And they did.
And they did well.
The house that Rambo built.
Well, you are quite an inspiration. Well, I think, and I watched you with some of these young authors, you know, that are just getting published, and you're so generous and
I'm a teacher. I've been in education. I was in education for much of my life. I taught at the University of Iowa. I was a professor of American literature there. I love students because I remember
how you were.
I remember when I needed help and people gave it to me, and I do believe in the pay it forward principle.
I do too.
And you know, you're either contributing or you're part of the problem. You sound like somebody from the 60s. And it's very, very important for us to give back. And so I do that. And plus I have such sympathy, you know, people starting out and they don't know what to do, and the confusion and what have you. And all we can do is be generous. And I have a goal, which is to demonstrate good nature at all cost. And that I hope people, when they meet me and talk to me, can sense that stillness that I have worked hard on, and the feeling that, you know, that good nature, so that perhaps if it's contagious, people can go to other places and do the same thing.
Great philosophy.
And it feels good too.
And on that, we're going to end this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're quite welcome.